This past Sunday, like so many of you, my wife and I, after we got out of church, after I preached a sermon on the conflict of the ages, we went to go see the conflict of the Super Bowl. We sat at home like everybody else and enjoyed a very interesting Super Bowl game. What made it so interesting is that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, their defense seemed to know what the offense of the Kansas City Chiefs was going to do. They were aware of the fact that Tyreek Hill, one of the fastest men in football, maybe the fastest, was capable of astonishing feats. In a previous game, he had gained over 200 yards through pass receptions in the first quarter alone. And so Tampa Bay designed their defense to shut their opponent's offense down, and they accomplished that. Having said that, we have an opponent, and the opponent is Satan. And he is accompanied by a legion of fallen angels, and they are our opponents in this life. And I'm going to deal with a couple of verses in Ephesians 6. I'm only going to get started this week, and in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to look at how they roll, how they operate, so that we can understand them better. This sermon is entitled The Conflict of the Ages. Next week, we'll see the devil's dirty dozen, the 12 ways he is most successful in derailing Christians in their walk with Christ. And then after that, the unseen realm, the whole realm of angels, fallen and holy, and how they impact our lives and what they are up to and where they came from. We'll look at that. But first of all, let's go to Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10 and 11. We're not going to get very far today, but like I say, we need to set the stage so we can understand better this conflict of the ages and what is behind it. Here's what it says. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. That word schemes, the old translations calls it the wiles of the devil. They say he is wily. Scheming is a special word. He is out to do two major things in the life of a Christian. He can't take away our salvation. So here is his goal. Number one, to destroy your effectiveness, your Christian witness, to make it so your witness is not powerful. Secondly, to destroy your joy, to take the joy of the Christian life away from you. It's important to know how evil Satan is. And so I'd like to establish a little bit of his personality and his characteristics. Charles Stanley, I love what he's written about Satan. He wrote, behind every evil person and every evil deed lurks a real enemy, the real enemy of your life. He exists in the spirit realm, and he is relentless in his pursuit of you. He is 100% evil, and he has a scheme, a plan to destroy your life. So here's what we learn. Satan is real. Satan is unseen. Satan is highly organized. Satan is a liar, and I could give you Bible verses for all of these. Satan is crafty and scheming. Satan is intent on ruining your life. Satan is intent on taking away your joy, and Satan is not alone. If we go a little bit further, which we won't address in detail today, it says, for our struggle is not against flesh and blood. In other words, our struggle is not against people that disagree with us, but it's against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. And in the next few weeks, we're going to address those. What are they? How do they work? What can we do to resist them? Now, last night, I was watching a TV show on secret societies. And a thought came to me. They were talking about, some of the major ones that people think are conspiring to run the world from behind the scenes. The Illuminati, the Opus Dei, some would say the Masonic Order. And they were going into all of the secret stuff they do. Well, here's what I came away with after watching that. I said, I just had a thought. The real secret society that's working behind the scenes is Satan and his demons. They are real. The others may not have much power. They may not really be doing this. But Satan and his demons are a secret society unseen to us that are hard at work, and they have a scheme for this world and for your life. John Stott said this: bear in mind that they have no moral principles. They have no code of honors, no higher feelings. They recognize no Geneva Convention to restrict or partially civilize the weapons of their warfare. They are utterly unscrupulous and ruthless in their pursuit of their malicious designs. Here's what the Bible says: your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour, and we are the someones. It doesn't say that. I'm adding that, but that's the truth. He's after us. So, let's look at this. God has provided for us power in this battle. Now, I don't want you to go away being so fearful, because God didn't give you the spirit of fear. He gives us a spirit of power, according to Timothy. Now, God has provided for us. We have a power available during the conflict. Verse 10, let me go back to verse 10. The start of it says, finally. And by the way, finally is concluding a major section on practical spiritual living. How to be a good husband, a good wife, a good father, a good child, a good employee, a good employer, just all kinds of great practical application. And now he says, but finally, be strong in the Lord. Be strong in the Lord. This is a power statement. God says, I've given you power. In his mighty power. He emphasized not just power, but might. He throws these words together, and it's sort of like the fist in the glove. In other words, if I were to put on boxing gloves and go into the ring against anybody, I would get killed in the boxing ring. Now, I might have the champion's gloves on, but they're my fist inside there. And what I like to think about is when I have the power in God, be strong in the Lord. The Lord is in me and on me. He is the fist inside the glove. He is the fist inside of me. It's his power, not mine, that's inside that glove that gives it the power. And here it talks about the armor. It says, finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power, put on the full armor of God. Now, I need to tell you something. People die because they don't put their seatbelts on with the shoulder straps. Even though people have warned us that it's so dangerous. I've talked to police officers that said, I've never had to unbuckle a dead person from a seatbelt because the seatbelts almost always are effective in saving lives. Why do people die? Often it's because they didn't put on their armor, the seatbelt. Why do people get into deep trouble in the spiritual battle when God has provided the armor? Typically, it's because they have not put the armor on, or they've only put on part of the armor. You say, what is that armor? Come on back in 3 weeks and we will tell you about that. But we need to strap it on, not just strap it on, but we need to get it on before the battle begins. The Roman legions, they would make sure that they had their armor on before, rather than trying to jump into it while the arrows and the swords are swinging and flying. Battles are lost because of a lack of preparation. Now, let me talk to you about the Roman soldiers. Now, Paul, when he was writing this, Paul was chained to a Roman soldier. They would have 3 of them each day, 8-hour shifts. He was under house arrest. And by the way, many of those soldiers came to Christ. That's a whole nother story. But he understood the Roman soldiers well. When they went to battle, here's what they had. They had a belt. And on the belt, they had all of their weapons. It allowed them to keep their hands free to fight and to carry all the weapons. We see our soldiers today with those types of belts. They had a breastplate. It's like body armor, and it was to protect their vital organs. And then they had the boots. They didn't want to get shoved back by the opponents, so they had these boots called caligulae, and they were hobnail boots. So they had these metal hobs, if you will, and they said one of the most terrifying sounds for the enemy was to hear the Roman legions marching up a Roman road with those hobnail boots just clicking and clicking and clicking, and it put fear into their hearts. And then there's the helmet. They would wear the helmet to protect the head. And the sword. It was 2 feet long and 2-edged. And it was said of it, it was an offensive weapon so deadly that it overwhelmed the civilized world. And then there was a shield. They would have a large shield that they could get their body behind. And one of the reasons they needed that was because the enemy would dip their arrows in tar, ignite them, and a volley of them, hundreds at the same time, would be flying toward the Roman legions. And of course it would kill them if they didn't have the shield. And so they'd put these shields up, and it protected all the ranks of the legionnaires. We have similar armor in our life. It's armor against Satan. For example, the shield of faith. We're going to get into that in several weeks. But it says, in addition to all of this, take up the shield of faith with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. Now, I've been talking with people that have been getting stung by fiery darts or fiery arrows. I had a family member call me, and it was just like arrows were coming out of everywhere, and they sting and they hurt. And that's why we need the armor, we need the shield. And Satan, to get to a church or to get to a ministry, doesn't go after the church. He goes after the individual warriors in that church, and he fires his stinging darts, his flaming darts. And Spurgeon says he goes especially after those who are doing the best job. For example, Spurgeon said, thus, for you who honor God the most, Satan will struggle very sternly. He does. And Billy Graham talked about how Satan is intensifying his efforts in this world today because he knows his days are limited. And before his death, Billy Graham wrote this: demonic activity and satanic worship are on the increase in every part of the world. The devil is alive and more at work than at any other time. The Bible says that when the devil realizes his time is short, his activity will increase. And he doesn't come across as this scary creature with horns and a pitchfork. He's described as an angel of light who likes to imitate things of God and imitate things that are good. But what may look good is entirely evil. Well, one third thing, we've seen that he has a scheme for our life. We've seen that we have armor we need to put on. And then one final thought: so that you can stand against the schemes of the devil. Now, that word schemes comes from the word methodeia, which means methodical. Here's how he rolls. He is methodical, he is systematic, he is patient, and he is after us. We talk about the secret societies. They had nothing compared to this one. It is behind the conflict of the ages. It was raging long before I was born, long before you were born. W.A. Criswell, that great Southern Baptist preacher, wrote this: there is a conflict and a war at the very heart of the universe. We cannot escape it. We cannot flee from it. Even in the days of peace, prepare for war. There is conflict at the very heart of the universe, and all history is surely written in blood. You start looking back in the Bible, and you see that the conflict was raging in the Garden of Eden. During that time of innocence before the fall, there's Satan trying to tempt with his scheme to bring down Adam and Eve. And Job, Satan had a scheme for Job. He actually accused Job in the presence of God in heaven. And then there was Jesus, the Son of God. Satan had a scheme to derail him during that time of temptation in the wilderness. And then Daniel talks about the schemes of Satan and how Daniel prayed for help. And the angel finally got to Daniel and said, I would have been here earlier, but I was in conflict with the fallen angel that was working on the leader of Persia. And so you see that there is this unseen angelic battle going on. And it's not just us. It's God's holy angels against the fallen angels, the secret society, if you will, of Satan. And Revelation talks about the final war between Michael, the archangel, and the heavenly angels, and Satan as he is thrown out of heaven. So don't go in unarmed. All right. So wrapping this up, Satan's plan may include a number of the following. It's not limited to it, but it includes, for example, destroying the quality of your life. He can hurt you. He can bring physical distress, emotional distress, trying to destroy the quality of your life. And next week, we're going to see the devil's dirty dozen. And one of his most effective is discouragement. He uses these things to discourage us and get us sidetracked. Secondly, he tries to take away our peace and joy. Oh, he steals the blessing. Something great happens. The next thing you know, it's like we're on a downer because Satan does something to steal the blessing. Or he'll use other believers, many of them weak believers, but other believers to hurt you. I think the greatest hurt comes within churches from other believers. A fourth thing he does is he causes misunderstandings in churches and in relationships. He is the author of misunderstandings, where people get twisted out of shape because they think somebody meant something when they didn't. He can damage, number 5, your witness for Christ on this earth. Oh, he doesn't want us to be effective witnesses. He can't take away my salvation, but he can hinder what I do for Christ. Number 6, diminish my rewards in heaven. Number 7, involve us in, regardless of whether or not we want to be involved. Now you say, well, I don't want to be part of this fight. Well, the day you got saved, you're in, brother. Number 8, attack you where you're most vulnerable, or when you're most vulnerable. William Gurnall, one of the Puritan divines, wrote a book, The Christian in Complete Armor. And he said, here are the people Satan goes after with the greatest vigor. Number 1, the newly converted, trying to put them on the bench before they actually get going. The physically afflicted, to cause discouragement and depression. Those who have recently achieved some notable success. When you are successful, you are vulnerable, usually through pride, by the way. We'll get into that later. Those that are bored and idle. We say the boredom is the devil's playground. It really is. If you're sitting around and you have nothing better to do, Satan will fill that vacuum. Or those that are not fellowshipping or accountable to others, where you're the Lone Ranger out there, you don't have another believer you're fellowshipping with. And that's one of the problems during this pandemic, where people don't have that face-to-face interaction and keeping tabs with each other. Well, there's another thing. Number 9, cause you to become discouraged. We've talked about that. Number 10, tempt you to become cynical regarding life and church. Well, I've lived in church life, and I've been around people for many years now. And it's easy to get cynical about some of these other Christians if we take our eyes off Christ. It's not about them, it's about Christ. Don't let it happen. Charles Stanley said, Satan can and will attempt to drag you down into such deep bondage that you will lose your joy in living. Some may call this bondage oppression or depression or addiction. If the devil can pull you into bondage, you will have no peace, no zest for living, and perhaps even no will to continue to live. So, you need to remember a number of things. Spurgeon again talked about the battle, and he said, like the Spartans, you know them, the great Greek warriors. He said, like the Spartans, every Christian is born a warrior. It is his destiny to be assaulted. It is his duty to attack. And Spurgeon goes on, we don't have to just defensively sit back and take it. We can attack the fortresses of Satan. Randall went on to say that it can't be done apart from God. He said, although the devil can never separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus, he can so wound us in battle as to render the believer powerless in this life and in his life and in his witness for Christ. He goes on, it is impossible to outwit the devil. It's impossible to outstrategize the devil. All education will never keep us from falling into the invisible war. It is impossible for man to even understand the depth of the wicked schemes of the evil one. Martin Luther put this to music in his great song, about the mighty fortress is our God. When he says his craft, talking about the devil, his craft and power are great, and armed with cruel hate, on earth is not his equal. Okay, so we're on earth. We are not his equal. He's smarter than us. He's been around longer. He's got legions supporting him. He's organized. He is scheming. He is wily. But you need not fear. As Paul said to Timothy, God did not give you a spirit of fear, but of power. And as we start to read, and I'll get into our power next time, we read places like James 4:7, where it says 3 things. Submit yourself then to God. That's step number 1. And that's part of the armor, by the way. Then resist the devil with the armor on, and he will flee from you. That is a promise. That is a declaration. If you submit yourself to God and you arm yourself with his power and resist him, he will flee from you. In 1 John 4:4, you are of God, little children, and have overcome them. Because, listen to this, greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. All right, so it's not about you. It's the power, the fist in the glove. He is in you, and you can resist the devil. Now, next week, how do we resist him? The dirty dozen. What are the 12 major plans he has and how to thwart them? And then we'll see the unseen realm, and then we'll see the armor. Thank you for joining us today. See you next week.